Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to be looking more TexTalks BattleTech, specifically the Rifleman. Now, I know a little about this guy, mostly because I actually have him on tabletop, and he's good. I mean, I kind of prefer the Archer more just because I like our alarms, but that's really about the extent of what I know about the Rifleman. Other than, it's a really good platform if you want to lose your arms and get your guns shot off, and then spend the rest of the match just walking around without guns. Maybe I'm a little biased because I took a few dozen really unlucky hits that decided to shred all the hard points I had with actual guns, and I'm very biased because of specific events on tabletop. That said, you guys know the deal. Link below, original video, hit it up. And we're done, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and hit me up on Twitter. I'm there. Hit me up here. I'm on YouTube. Hit me up on Discord. There's a link below. But if you see me on TikTok, that's not me. That's the person impersonating me and somehow also doing a couple 100,000 views per video with my face. I don't get it. I really don't. But it's a thing. Yeah. So otherwise, let's get started. Actually, I don't recognize that one. I'm just going to go back for a bit. Did I miss something? Was I supposed to do the Rifleman next? Space Western. I remember Stumpy Nevermore. Macho Man. Stumpy. And I can't even read that one. An oversized clanner appears. To be fair, an awesome with enough PPC lasers could take out a lot of things. Don't get me wrong, love the clan mechs, but if you get the right awesome, they're terrifying.
Howdy, folks. Tex of the Black Pants Legion here.
Oh, is that a Rifleman as well?
Here we are
bulkier
again.
And that one looks
TexTalks BattleTech.
This is one of the old designs, isn't it? Episode 11, the Rifleman, the original Flak Gang. Flak Gang? Was it anti-air? Huh. Whoa. Dropship Queen Bee en route to Van Zandt. Oh, they're actually... Oh. Dude. Oh, so that's all those... You know, this is going to sound weird, but I've always seen in the games where they show the dropships with the various leopards on. I never actually thought how these would anchor on, and... Is it just me, or are these regular dropships just kind of weird looking? Because they're just, they look like skin tags on the face of the ship. It's really weird when you think about it. Also, love the art. Holy shit.
Howdy there, class.
And one just left.
Take your seats and get comfortable.
Wait, what just...
Howdy
and it fell off,
class.
okay.
Please take your seats and get comfortable.
Damn.
Please welcome our new
Hope it doesn't fall
classmates
out.
who've joined us from the last place we visited. Yes, I know. We tend to
the
pick
internal
up strays,
mall
but
of the dropship.
as
Sure,
long
why
as
not?
they're not disruptive, they're welcome.
Hey, can you tell me why you picked the clown up? He's gonna do bad stuff.
They picked up a
I'm
clown?
not the most trustworthy guy around, but I know trouble when I see it.
If we're asking
What's with the redhead?
questions, Ronald Easter, why are you like 32 pixels?
That hurts, man. I was born this way.
The
That's
truth
quite
always
the
hurts.
disadvantage.
Don't believe me? Ask a clanner about 3052, or Capellans about why their territory keeps shrinking. Anyways, this lecture is about one of the most iconic
really big fan
and
of
I feel tragically misunderstood mechs to ever grace the battlefields
Wait,
of the
misunderstood?
Airier and beyond. It's a mech that has served nobly in its intended role, while simultaneously drawing sharp criticism from those too dim to see its battlefield purpose beyond just another mech, often maligned by poor commanders or
I'm feeling personally called out for the probably completely accurate representation of my horrible commanding of a Rifleman.
Yeah. This mech has endured 500 years of war, and above everything else, is a respectable machine when used correctly in its intended role.
I'm feeling a bit called out. This is going to be a very, very fun video, isn't it? Oh, God.
Yes. Today, we learn about the humble Rifleman.
It's really cool art, though. Are those 3 Riflemans? Ah. Preamble.
Today, we
Same
shall
thing in black and
discuss
white?
its beginnings as a second-generation mech
those solar
manufactured
panels
by
on
a
the side?
second-tier production company
Talon?
hoping to make the big time. We're
Oh.
going to discuss that in the shadow of the Mackie, the megacorps of the Inner Sphere hurriedly pushed a second generation of designs into mass production. With that serving as an introduction to the Rifleman's story, we will
Wait, seriously, the Rifleman's one of the oldest designs? Ooh, that's actually really cool.
discuss how it has, generation by generation, evolved to its current iteration.
How
as the
different are they in their
premier
variations?
anti-aircraft and fire support platform under 5 million C-bills. I hope to reveal by the conclusion of this lecture why the humble Rifleman has been a staple of inner-sphere warfighting for half a millennium and why it is still a damn decent weapon system to this very day. But to do justice to the Rifleman in its nearly uninterrupted 500-year production run, to properly
500? God damn! I knew the Rifleman was around for a while, but... I'm sorry, I'm just thinking that's 200 years pre-clan, because I don't think there's really enough time after the clan invasion to say it's been over 100 years. It's been like 50. I think. I'm not entirely sure about what happens after the clan invasion, timeline-wise. Like, how long the timeline actually goes for. God damn, that's... I knew this was a venerable mech. I knew it was an older design, but... I'm actually a little blown away by that. Holy shit.
Explain its place in history. I need to cover some background in order to make certain you understand not only what the Rifleman is, but what it was and how it got to be here. Rolling back the clock and covering in brief some past lecture material, I begin this lesson with a short overview on the so-called Age of War and how it shaped conflict as we understand it today.
Started the Aries convention, or right after it definitely completely worked.
The earliest texts we
it.
have from before the Age of War demonstrate that it started as most periods of conflict often do, with a dangerous power vacuum.
Oh, this is cool. So Federated Suns with an armored fighting dropship going against things trying to shoot it down. Yeah, you don't really see this in later art, so this is definitely well early on. Did I say Federated Suns? Wow, I'm judging myself on that one, Liren. Wow.
Vacuum and those powers who saw great opportunity in it. In the early days of the Inner Sphere, the collapsing Terran Alliance withdrew its support, protection, and governance from nearly all of its colonies. This left hundreds of worlds which were now governance sphere. The collapsing Terran Alliance withdrew its support, protection, and governance from nearly all of its colonies. This left hundreds of worlds which were now totally free for the very first time to self-govern, and the decisions they made in those early years would guide and shape all that followed. Some colonies...
That's actually something I've been very curious about. I've heard about the Terran Alliance. I know it was renamed the Hegemony. And Tex kinda covered it, but what caused the Alliance itself to collapse? Because I'm pretty sure... Maybe I'm just missing something here. It's probably something that was covered and I just forgot it. So if someone could just let me know, I'd actually appreciate it. But what caused that? And I'm assuming it was just political backstabbery, because that just seems to be a general thing of like, why did something happen? Someone fucked around. I mean, it's probably what I expect, but kind of curious for more specifics.
Made in those early years would guide and shape all that followed. Some colonies were snuffed out by others in the desperate scramble for resources, manpower, and riches. Other colonies died as a result of being incapable of existing without outside aid, protection, and now non-existent governmental logistics structures. Without supply lines from distant Terra, many colonies found themselves quickly short of food or other necessary supplies. In this new era of independence, some colonies
is this what led to the Houses Rising?
Quickly becoming beacons of civilization. And fewer still began to ally, conquer, and grow until they became nations in their own right. From 2271 to 2366, you see the emergence of what we would now recognize as the Great Houses.
Oh, so never mind. I don't think Tex ever went back this far before. And this is weird. Sorry, I'm just... Lao's huge. Sorry, the Capella Confederation is huge. Free World is... Honestly, chaotic, if that makes sense. Liren is already huge, but it's 3 distinct blobs, because I don't think they merged yet. The Draconis Combine is weird, because they just jumped really far in, and I know it's a sphere in the sense that it's not a flat plane, mostly. Although with how the Milky Way is set up, it's flat-ish, flat adjacent. It's got depth. It's like a box that's really long and wide, but not very tall. Yeah. But I don't think I've ever seen a star map of the inner sphere that's just this. Sorry, I'm kind of blown away by this. Also, the point where you realize this is only about A little more than 250 years in the future only. Sorry, that momentary realization that this is within a conceivable time frame. Like when you have 1,000 years in the future, it's like, yeah, that's really far. But when you get it down to 250, like I don't see people being able to get to space, let alone colonize a single planet in that amount of time. Let alone this. Like, even as small as it is, which I thought at first it's so tiny, it's overwhelmingly small. And then I'm thinking, no, in this time frame, this is huge. Yeah, honestly, just the sheer growth they're displaying in 250 plus years kind of makes you wonder why they didn't grow further. Because I know people are saying, because it takes a lot of time and money. No one really wants to do that if they have time and money already. I'm just sitting here going, but they did. That is insane growth, honestly. Especially since this is the collapse. So they were already expanded further. Whoa.
What started as small wars of conquest and consolidation of power between tiny nation-states over the course of a century gave ground to centralized.
Oh yeah, because they merged with the Federated Sons.
This was an era before FTL communication, mind you. And it is that principal limitation which allowed such a throwback as feudalistic systems of...
Now, this is interesting. I knew about the Collective. I knew the Concordat. Yeah, I was going to say Tarian, Concordat, whatever. I was missing my words. I knew they were around, but they're well established early on, and the Draconis Combine really wasn't. It looks like the Rimworld Republic was a big player. And, Roshlog. They're just around forever, man. And you can see the outline of where the actual inner sphere kind of comes to anyways. Just the major players are tiny right now, except for Lyran, but they're just massive wealth, so yeah. Oh, this time that might actually be the case. It's weird how some of the big players here, looks like the Rimworld and the Tauren Concordat, just look almost overwhelming power-wise compared to their neighbors. And the Capellan Confederation just... I'm so used to seeing their map ever shrinking that it's kind of weird to see that.
Of control to prosper in an age of interstellar governance. After solidifying control, these nations turned their gaze outward to bring more territory into their sphere of influence. War by war, raid by raid, through annexation, subjugation, diplomacy, and conquest. These states drove ever outward from their original borders.
And they're shooting
the
a
optional trend along the world was to capitulate or be smashed by the resources of a significantly more advanced, far better coordinated, and certainly better provisioned, greater interstellar power.
Yep.
With the sheer amount of resources now at their disposal, and having exhausted unaligned planets to conquer or annex the now established great powers of the inner sphere turned to their peers and began sizing each other up. Competition was no longer strong versus weak. Competition was between vast empires aligned to one house or another.
It's weak versus also weak because everyone's weak to nukes in this time period.
Conquered. In this era, there was war, and each rising power was either quick to test the other in interstellar conflict, or was subjugated in turn and relegated to the dustbin of history. With power consolidation, from fledgling colony to nation-state to great house, the rapid change in this era in terms of culture and governmental foci becomes plainly evident. Whereas planetary governments worry chiefly about survival, available food stores, and whether or not they can survive another year, their military options were accordingly of low priority and thus limited. A planetary government would raise militias when needed for protection, as standing armies were often beyond their ability to maintain.
And this part, it sounds weird since we're a single planet system right now. It's weird talking about Earth as united in a single planet, but that's just, I guess, comparatively, it makes more sense. It's just weird to say that they don't have the resources to maintain an army, but I guess it kind of makes sense because people keep telling me, especially the further back you go, planets were terraformed, but they took a very long time. And if they're so close to the 250 years plus from current day, it's probably closer to 280 years, but I'm just 250 sounds easier. it makes sense that they wouldn't be terraformed enough to really have mass production capabilities, and they wouldn't have the infrastructure, because it sounds like everything that was infrastructure was Terran-based, and that collapsed. And I really want to know more about that, because that sounds really freaking cool. That sounds like the fall of Rome. Like, I know a lot of stuff later on feels like the fall of Rome, and there's aspects of history tied around, but it seems like the Terran Alliance was Rome, and then its fall is like that period where all of the areas controlled by Rome in the Mediterranean area and Europe and part of everywhere, actually, a good portion of the world, at least that section of it, you know, the further east or west you go, or south even less, but that's different. They all kind of splintered off into their own nations that had been underneath it. And this is what happens here. Now I want to know what happened prior to that even.
The best they could do was to try to ensure that peace was maintained, or that the next conqueror didn't believe in the expansionist policies of Genghis Khan. Consolidated power had its own rewards, though. Above all other things, unified governments can afford to invest in their futures. They could lay plans that span decades, if not generations. They could plan for the future, set aside worlds as breadbaskets, strip mine entire continents on others, and shuffle the vast workforces necessary to take advantage of every resource they found. Unified interstellar governments often have an enormous manpower surplus and can easily raise and maintain standing armies, funnel vast funds toward mutual defense, and
one thing I want to touch on from the entire idea of vast funds to draw from, it's basically the situation behind taxes. If you're just drawing all the money you need for what you need right now to protect yourself from the one place that needs it, that's a huge drain. So if you spread the burden out further, when done well, it's like, okay, instead just give us a little bit, maybe 1% instead of 50% to pay for the army that needs to be there, because you're spreading around the cost. It's also the principle behind insurance. It's the principle behind how most supermarkets actually get their food. They're not getting the food right where they're at because that one place might not be able to supply enough. So they get it from what is supplied, and they'll take it from all over the world. There's a lot more. I'm oversimplifying that to hell and back. But essentially, if you spread out the net you're drawing from, it might be cheaper somewhere else, and you can get more of it somewhere else. And then if you draw from many sources, you get just a little here, a little there, a little there. But if you're drawing a little from a huge amount, it becomes massive. So that one force you need in one place, drawn from everywhere, works. And if you can move it around, make it mobile, which they can sort of do at this time period. I'm not sure how well jump ships worked back during this time period, but it had to because they're already in the stars. It would be much more affordable. But you have to get to the point where you have those coalitions to start with. And it sounds like even forming that right now is why it's a time period of war, because everyone's trying to be the one in charge. Because if you're the one in charge, you get to draw from all those resources, which is also why the wars are happening. So the advantage of having the coalition is also why you need the coalition, because other people's coalitions want you in their coalition, but specifically under them. It's a fight over resources because there's no effective way to terraform. The irony, of course, is if they really came up with a super sci-fi, like not even semi-hard sci-fi, which BattleTech skirts on, the jump system is really the most crazy sci-fi level. If they came up with something crazy, like really fast terraforming of a world, a lot of the resource problems that are what everyone's fighting over, not everyone, there's a lot of other things, including, oddly enough, the Jihad era, where it was just different resources because the resource was, I don't like you, I want you dead because you don't believe in my God, the machine. Word to Blake, man. I'm hyper simplifying it, but also because I know very little about them, but I know just enough to know that they're terrifying. And I kind of like them for it. But yeah, just one of those interesting things. I just love the dynamics.
To their neighbors with paranoia who were arming themselves similarly. Where once colonies had to scrabble for survival, an unavoidable and unenviable state of being for young worlds.
I've seen the art before.
And now great houses were unified, stronger,
it's mech
and
level,
with clear
not
cause to direct them. And being that this is the inner sphere we're talking about, that cause, inevitably, was war.
Yeah.
And so began the Age of War. The Age of War itself is a much-studied, though poorly understood, period of time between 2398 and 2571.
Almost 100 years, wow.
73 years, the Inner Sphere would change drastically, not only in national borders, but significantly in culture. In this era, you saw the rise of the warship as the big stick of international diplomacy.
Still love warships, even if they are just giant money sinks.
War crimes by the megaton.
Yeah.
The Age of War also bore witness to the eclipse of the warship by the BattleTech, as a result of restrictions on war governed.
I've heard that thing in the background isn't an archer, but an early mech design.
The Aries Conventions, which as previously discussed, did civilize warfare,
somewhat,
but at measurable cost. While noble in intention, and certainly preventing the issue of massacres such as Tintavel from becoming the
Yeah, preventing massacres, and then enabling it to take out anyone who doesn't sign on.
norm. The conventions simultaneously allowed for war to become standard practice, by which a nation sorted out its primary differences with fellow nations.
Yeah.
Or
And of
to
course,
quote
Terran
an
Hegemony
ancient Terran
profited heavily off it.
philosopher, it was diplomacy by any other means, and such times gave ground to war without end. The early Age of War began with the Free Worlds League and the Capellan Confederation duking it out over the Endurian system, which sparked a series of conflicts that would eventually envelop the Inner Sphere. The 6-year Endurian conflict was a key moment, for the broad military power of the unified Great House proved that war was now bigger than ever before, and accordingly a great deal more costly. And thanks to the enormous manpower and industrial strengths of the Great Houses, wars like this were not uncommon.
This is actually something I feel I'm missing an obvious one. He's talking about the war in the Endurian system, but he was also just previously mentioning the Aries Convention time period. So is he talking back during the Age of War, or is he talking back during the Age of mechs starting? I don't actually know. Considering we're seeing art right now of human level fighting, I miss. Ow. Gotta love when you went around and make us cough. Because we do see art of just a human level here, I'm assuming that this is back during the Age of War, but I could be mistaken just because there was that jump ahead in what he was talking about.
The Draconis Combine fought the Lyran Commonwealth, starting with a surprise attack on New Year's Day, 2407.
Starships.
And the Lyran Commonwealth, in a 6-month retreat, burned whole continents in a scorched earth defense.
Damn!
This surprise conflict would not only form the foundation of the long-standing feud between the Draconis Combine and the Lyran Commonwealth, but...
See, this is one of those things I never really got, because at least with the star map I'm used to in the pre-clan invasion, post at least second or third secession wars, up until everything after that, the Lyrian Commonwealth and the, I was going to say Taurian Concordate again, but the Kurita, just, they don't, wait, was he talking about, oh, it was Lyran and, wait, I thought it was Kurita. I was like, but they're not really close to each other. They don't, like, other than this fighting in the general area right in the center of the sphere, it doesn't really seem like they would have much contact. I might have missed something.
Defense. This surprise New Year's Day, 24 fought the Lyran Commonwealth, starting with a surprise attack on New Year's Day, 2407. And the Lyran Commonwealth, in a 6-month retreat, burned whole continents in a scorched earth defense.
Damn.
This surprise conflict would not only form the foundation of the long-standing feud between the Draconis Combine and the Lyran Commonwealth.
No, this was Kurita. Because there was that spear of Kurita that went very far into the center of the inner sphere, I guess maybe they had more conflict around there because they were fighting over everything? Maybe? But also they talk about how the borders changed so much. Maybe they were much more malleable and even closer together to start with, and fighting over, well, territory that used to be up for grabs and now isn't yet part of the hegemony. Sorry, I don't know anything about this time period. I didn't even know there was a time period prior to the hegemony where the alliance was a thing and then collapsed, so they had to spread out initially. And I didn't even know about this era until now. Or if Tex missed it, I just messed with it? If Tex mentioned it, that's the word. I missed it completely.
But as a result of nearly losing the conflict, the Lyran Commonwealth relocated the Great House capital to its current-day location.
Oh, so they were closer
Tharkat.
originally, okay.
The war also cemented the Steiner dynasty's rule over the Lyran Commonwealth, a practice which has continued since.
Really?
For good.
Why?
Or ill. This era
How did that
also
happen?
saw the rise of the Terran hegemony to a place of true power, which it
Claiming the
accomplished
center.
by fighting its own war to reclaim former Terran Alliance colonies, or at least ensure its own borders did not shrink among competing interests from the other great powers.
Yeah.
As better detailed in a previous lecture,
Previously on text.
this would all change at Tintavel.
The Mackie.
In Tintavel, a world died. It was not the first world to die in this manner.
Oh.
Where nuclear weapons had become the standard means of battlefield escalation.
And that's actually one of the things I wanted to think about, because Tintavel was kind of a turning point where everyone just thought it was going to move on, get in, get out. But if Tex is mentioning that wasn't the first time an entire world had died, what made Tintavel worse than them? Was it just the thought that no one expected it to become bad and the expectation made it more shocking? That's all I got right now, because if he's even acknowledging, no, there were previous dead worlds. Maybe it's just because people actually found out about this one and previously they died in darkness.
Nukes were the exclamation point for a war. The ultimate end to you and what army. Or,
Yeah.
so what if you won? It would prove the end of a wasteful era.
Although I'd like to point out, and I mentioned this way more often and early on in the videos, if you really want to fuck over a planet, you don't need a nuke. You just need to get a big enough asteroid from an asteroid belt, if there's one around, knock it out of place on a trajectory where it will impact the planet, and you can just end the planet. Granted, and I can't believe I'm saying this, a nuke might be a more safe tactical option for the planet in general if you actually want to claim it later on. Yeah, if you get a big enough rock, if you can just nudge it out of its orbit, or you can just do the math to get it in there, sure, they would have maybe a decade, and that's probably why you didn't want to do it, but it's entirely possible. And if you have jump ships that can jump in with a payload of just giant rock, because at this time warships were bullshit, maybe it was possible, you could probably do some significant damage with that, or just get a rocket, not even go through orbital dynamics, put rockets on it and just use weaponized rockfall. I mean, if you want to say rocks fall, everyone dies, it could very well do that. You could strip continents from planets. There's models of what certain sizes of asteroids and meteorites striking the planet would do to Earth right now. It goes from, that's scary, to, oh yeah, here's nightmare fuel really fast.
And the beginning of another. The Ares conventions were drawn up and changed the game, so to speak. You couldn't just club an enemy to death, kick his worlds like so many sandcastles,
I mean,
and
you still
claim
do that,
victory
but
by raising the flag over what ashes remain. War now had rules, which
were very much completely acknowledged all the time, except for the succession wars and the other succession war and the other succession war. And I think for the fourth one, there was a succession war. Was there a fifth succession war? Oh, and then there was the... You realize I can just go on and on about this. It's the Ares Convention. Everyone does follow it, unless it's something where they don't want to anymore.
had the effect you know all too well.
Yeah.
As it was predicted, with strict rules, war became trivialized.
It's
War
trivial
became a sport,
up until they
a
really,
sport
really
in
want
which
to
the
win.
points were counted in bodies and territory. A sport that has become the national pastime of many nations.
Yeah.
And a profession, uber alles, for a select few mad enough to willingly gamble their lives.
I literally just got the reference now. They talked about war as sport in the Mackie videos, and it never clicked to me that when I was talking about the clan videos and access to elementals, I was like, oh, individual battles is sport. Clan mech warriors and all the clan warriors, they're sport. Mechwarriors for the clan is the sport of the clans. And I'm thinking here, it's just literally a small scale of what the Inner Sphere was already doing with war as a sport. Oh, God. It's just sport all the way down, up until it's not a sport anymore, and then they just ignore the Ares Convention. Yeah.
Lives. In 2412,
Okay,
the
we
Ares
will stop using
Conventions
nukes on
were
people.
signed, making sure everyone
Sometimes.
agreed to the same rules of war. And with those rules in mind, and with observers on hand to
Tarians
ensure they
don't
were
count.
monitored, the great
Tarians?
houses
Tarians.
changed gears and an age of war continued. For the Ares Conventions were not an end to conflict, merely a way to keep score. In 2416, the Lyran Commonwealth
So you could actually
knew
have a
rules
score at
in
the end.
hand and with mostly impartial observers to ensure war crimes were at an acceptable level, charged into the Free Worlds League. In Lyran fashion, with vast armies and generalship being a purchased status symbol among the political
Wait, what?
elite.
No, go back.
Acceptable level, and with most Aries conventions were not 16, the Lyran Commonwealth, new rules in hand, and with mostly impartial observers to ensure war crimes were at an acceptable level,
Yeah.
charged into the Free Worlds League. In Lyran fashion, with vast armies and generalship being a purchased status symbol among.
Oh, I was getting Steiner and Lyran confused with Merrick and the Free Worlds League, wasn't I? Yep, that would do it. Okay.
The political elite, the war turned into a clusterfuck. Captain General Peter Merrick, an accomplished practitioner of actual warfighting, launched a brilliant counteroffensive into Lyran's space that resulted in a swift truce. Part of this is because the Free Worlds League understands how war actually works. Part of this is, as well, the embarrassing requirements of command officer training in the Lyran Commonwealth.
Yeah, never mind. I remember the app. Lyran. I don't know why I keep getting the Free Worlds League and Merrick confused with the Lyran Commonwealth. It's probably because they're both blue. And I usually don't deal with them in any game. Yeah, meant to. Never got around to it.
Wealth is being who you know and paid off to get there.
Well, yes, I'm something of a Mechwarrior myself.
Generals are bad and bought their way into a shiny uniform.
Oh,
but
God.
typically, Steiner officers tend to have the same level of battlefield experience as the regimental marching band. From 2418 to
I would let you know, I would honestly put more stock in the regimental marching band than anyone who buys a command from Lyrans. Yeah, you take their money, and then you don't take their advice.
2422, in the shadow of Tintavel, war erupted between the Capellan Confederation and the Taurian Concordat. The Capellans launched into war without following any sort of rules, written or otherwise, as they
this is why you
pointed out,
always
the
hit the
Taurian
Capellans.
Concordat was a non-signatory of the Ares conventions and thus free game. Technically, for the record, they were correct. They,
legally,
with nothing held back, assumed a swift victory over a periphery nation. This would be a test, an established inner sphere power versus what was felt to be a very minor periphery nation.
You say that, but it doesn't really feel like they were a minor periphery nation. Especially because they're so established at this point, and the more I hear about it, the more the idea of inner sphere itself seems like the decision line between periphery and inner sphere is just, we managed to get big enough, strong enough, fast enough that we can say you're not one of us anymore. Not that they actually are. Which we also know is exactly what kind of is true, because the initial Star League was just to get the periphery nations to stop fucking around. And by fucking around, I mean challenging the people who became the Star League. Yeah, there's a lot of issues there. I'm oversimplifying. I'm aware of that. But at the same time, it's also not entirely wrong. God damn. Also, I just looked at the time. I need to go start streaming now. Oops. Looked at the time. I meant to start a BattleTech stream in 5 minutes. I need to go do that. Otherwise, I'd actually keep going, because this is really freaking cool, man. Sorry, I love the history. So much of this, all of the history behind battle mechs, how they rose, how they were used. It's so freaking cool. Also, the fact that it's putting off having my idiocy and how to use a rifleman not thrown in my face immediately. That's nice too. Yeah. I'm going to be eating a lot of crow when that comes up, probably. Yeah. So if you haven't already, though, there's a link below to the original video from the Black Pants Legion. Hit it up. And we're done. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.